Hey guys, welcome back. Tisha here, back with another chapter read. Give Me Back My Children from Sarah C. Allred. And I have a feeling, y'all, I don't know how to tell you guys this, that I think that she's going to do the same thing that Rachel did and leave us hanging when it comes towards the end, because look at how much book we have left. Do you see this? I'm feeling away, but I don't jump ahead. You guys know that when I read the books, we read it together, but I'm just showing you guys where we're at in the book, what we've read and where we're at. We don't have much left here, and I'm nervous. Go ahead, do me a favor, hit the like button as we begin chapter 20, Not Again, whatever that means. The phone dropped out of my hand. I hardly breathed. I slipped down the bedroom wall, the only thing keeping me from hitting the floor. The room tipped around me. This was all wrong. Rich knew I could never live through this again. This was a nightmare of the worst kind. They'd taken our kids. Probably because where we left off was the whole her son, her baby, falling out the crib, hitting his mouth and having to get 2 implants. And we're about to see. Fog took over my sensible brain. Why does the Lord punish me so hard? Had I heard Rich right? This had to be a sick joke. Rich wasn't taking 2 of my children away from me this time. He was taking all 4 of them. I couldn't show weakness, just in case my reaction was part of the test. I couldn't show what a struggle this was. I processed the recent phone conversation. The Lord has finally answered our prayers. I'll read the message given. The Lord heard your prayers and the cries of the children. Most especially, the Lord wants my children to be in Zion. The Lord said Sarah is not ready to return. The Lord has shown me the last time her children were taken, she held on to resentment towards her sister wives and even her priesthood head for allowing them to suffer. In love and mercy, I, the Lord, will give my daughter Sarah a chance to pass a test again. So Warren Jeff is using the fact that she wrote what she wrote in the second letter that he made her write against her. What a creep. Because of her prayers, I will not spew her out of my mouth. If she will use this to perfect her character, in a short time, I will allow her to follow her children to my holy land of Zion. How could this be happening again? My face drained of all color. God was watching me now. I could not let my mind go down the path it was running. They expected me not to be human. I threw myself on my knees and buried my face on the edge of the bed. I poured my heart out to God. I've been taught to love and worship my whole life, the God who is getting harder to please. In a few hours, I had to plead with the Lord to change his mind and see I was a good person. That's the problem, though. It's not the Lord who's deciding this. It's Warren. My children needed me. I think I skipped something. My children needed me. I again apologized to the Lord for struggling when I saw the change in my children. I again repented and promised to do anything to be forgiven of my weakness. The Lord did not hear my cries. Not many hours later, Rich closed my trailer, holding my children's possessions. I held tight to my boys and soaked up every last minute. Sarai was unwilling to let me go, and Janetta was carrying out her pillow. I kept expecting the sudden change of plans for Rich to say, "You get to come too." I asked for a private moment with Rich, but he avoided me and refused to give me an explanation as to how I could live without my children. Everyone watched to see how I reacted. When Rich tore my boys out of my arms, my eyes pleaded for him not to do this. How could he love me and be so determined to do this? When someone I loved went through pain, it nearly killed me. Sarai once again wouldn't let go. I wanted to stay with Mother. I want to stay with Mother. If Mother isn't going, neither will I. This time, her cries were wiser and stronger than before. She knew exactly what it meant and wouldn't give in. Rich bent down and whispered, "Don't let her see you cry." Who was this cruel man I once knew and loved? The problem was I knew this indescribable heartache facing me. I was sure my heart exploded in pain as Rich helped Lizzie rip Sarai out of my arms. The nightmare of 2 years ago merged with reality, both ripping through my soul with triple the pain. I tried hard to smile. I was on trial right now. It would make it harder for the children if I showed weakness. When Rich came towards me and hugged me goodbye, I was stone cold. Resentment armored me. I smothered the betrayal I felt from the one person who was supposed to love, protect, and honor me for time and all eternity. He ripped my heart out and left me shattered and afraid. When would I see my children again? Julie stayed behind too. Her 4-month-old son was in her arms. She cried as she buckled her 2-year-old daughter in the car seat. Rich said he wanted me to get close to her. The Lord revealed to the prophet that Julie had feelings for the caretaker. After 3 years and 2 children, she still hadn't fallen in love with Richard. So because she's not in love with Richard, who she hasn't been around, let's add that, she's in love with the caretaker? Come on. After 3 years and 2 children, she still haven't fallen in love. We moved out the same night and into another home of Richard's brothers. He also lived and worked in Las Vegas. Julie and I shared a room. 1 month passed. I spent a lot of time reading the scriptures and sewing all new wardrobes for my children. Rich refused to let me talk to the children and promised I'd be home soon. Warren left it up to Rich to decide when I could come back. Okay, so Lauren left it up to him, and he's still letting her stay all this time? Did he want her to be gone too? One day, Rich called. He instructed us to move to Short Creek with my uncle and Julie's father, who was assigned caretaker over my mother and brothers after father's death. Rich asked to talk to me privately. Julie has to go back with her parents, and I'm counting on her father and mother. Her heart isn't mine yet, and I need to know it is before she can return. We returned to Short Creek in great shame. How is she supposed to fall for you when you keep on punishing her, number one? And number two, when she's not around you? It doesn't make sense. It was more shameful than living in Las Vegas because Short Creek was condemned of the Lord. Only a few homes had the Lord's Spirit in them. Everyone knew it was dishonorable to come back, and I had to face my family in shame. They knew nothing of the hell I had experienced, and I was warned against revealing what happened. The Lord's work needed to remain sacred. To reveal it was to risk his vengeance and judgment. Because if you tell what's really going on, then a lot of these people are going to leave because they're going to realize that this is a crock of BS. It turned out to be a good experience. I got to see my brothers and witness how my family moved on since father's death. The thought of my father always brought a small stab of loneliness. Watching my family inside Warren Sullivan's care was astounding. He had such control over his family. My uncle, who was my mom's brother, had her working as a cook for his and my father's boys as they built houses for people outside the community. My uncle assigned his first of 3 wives to control the finances, and no one did anything without her approval. My mom respected my uncle and conformed to his rule in ways I never saw her do with my dad. It was difficult to watch. She was busy, but I managed to find time to talk. Mom, I really resent the way you treated Dad all my life. To watch you almost worship my uncles bothers me. Mom's face pinched with anger at my bluntness, and tears filled her eyes. I'm sorry you feel that way, but you have to realize it was my job to teach your father how to live. He was just a convert and didn't know as much as me. I lived it all my life in the prophet's home. I was frightened that your father would lose his family after I saw my father and others lose their priesthood. The Lord was merciful to take him in death before he had to live through it. Oh, wow. Anger within me grew. With each desperate pleading word, she fell farther away from my love and respect. Don't you dare speak about my father like that. Anger made it difficult to speak, and the words I could get out turned into ice, which drove us further apart. Father was the most patient, loving person in my life. I understand what you're saying. You were his precious girl, but you do not know what it was like for me. Tears poured down her face and my heart froze towards her. You think you're so much better than I. You have such a wonderful life. Now you're in Zion and without cares. You have everything so easy. You're married to a good man close to the prophet. I only wish I married someone as good as Rich. He's the man who showed me everything your father wasn't. I turned to walk out of the room in utter horror before I completely escaped. My mother said her final words. Have you ever thought that how I treat your uncle is how I'm trying to make up for the way I treated your father? That's some crap to say. Good grief. The first thing she said about my father was more than I could take. I shook her final words off before I let them touch my heart. My father had the patience of Job, the endurance of Samson, and the tenderness of the lamb. Yes, my father had flaws, but I never saw father turn his back on his family, even if they chose not to believe what he did. He had a strict schedule while at Short Creek. We all got up at 5. At 6, we had prayers and studied scriptures. 7 o'clock, the men ate breakfast, and half an hour later, the women were allowed to eat. Every hour on the hour, we gathered for prayer, no matter what we were doing. At noon, the men ate lunch and went back to work. And a half hour later, the girls ate and then cleaned up. Supper at 5:30 for the men, 6 for the girls so they could clean up afterwards. Prayer and class were at 7. The men sat in front and were required to be seated before the girls. The men are just set above everything in this thing. I mean, gracious. The women are just there to serve them and create babies. Men were not allowed to be in the same room with women, even brothers and sisters. Chatting with my own brothers was open disobedience. If we were caught, my brothers would act ashamed about talking to me. For 3 weeks, I lived this schedule. Rich surprised me one day by showing up and announcing he was taking me home. I hadn't seen or heard from my children in an eternally long 4 months. We left Julie with her family since she wanted to spend more time with them. It took 18 hours to return home, 18 hours to feel a range of emotion. I was excited to see my babies again, but also afraid. What kind of experience did they have during this separation? How much damage to our relationship would I have to fix this time? Will they remember me? Tears burned my eyes at the thought. I had to get some air. I rolled down the window, taking in the crisp evening of the Black Hills. The walls of Zion loomed in front of me. Was I ready to enter those gates and never come out? Now, I really felt choked. To a degree, I lived my life in seclusion from the rest of the world, but it was different to live in a world populated by less than 50 humans. My demons again whispered, "Run." No, you'll be with your children. As long as you have your children, it doesn't matter where you are. My mind traveled through thin ice. Similar thoughts got me separated from my babies in the first place. I took a deep breath and braced myself for the task ahead. Get to know my children, who lived 4 months knowing I wasn't good enough to be with the family. So even though he had the choice of when she could come back, he made her wait 4 months. Rich pulled up to the same house, but the opposite side of the duplex. When I entered, it was a mirror image of the many months ago when I first entered this place, even down to me sleeping in the dreaded room across from Richard's, and no children who ran to throw their arms around me. Instead, they all sat on a long couch in the family room and stared at me, confused and betrayed. I was a stranger to them. This was so much harder. This time, I wouldn't have my little boys to comfort me while I patiently waited for my girls to come around. Tears burned my eyes as the work of regaining their trust loomed before me. I fought against the impulse to swoop them into my arms and cover them with kisses and squeeze the lost months out of them. "Come hug Mother Sarah." Rich's soft but commanding voice agitated me in an impossibly selfish way. "So I am Mother Sarah now? Huh?" Sassy Demon demanded before I could smother it. I did not need that sentence coming out of my mouth right now. Andrew needed no more coaxing and rushed toward me. I scooped him into my arms, and he squeezed me so hard, like he needed to feel me before he believed it was me. His face lit up. 2-year-old Isaac stiffened as I touched him. His lips were firmly closed together, and his lower chin swayed back and forth. 6-year-old Janetta gave me a formal hug. Sarai glared at me, betrayed. This would take some time. I was so excited to see the children, I didn't think about my earthly possessions. My first clue to where they were was when I saw Natalie wearing my clothes. Wow. This is some, the little 16-year-old that he didn't, let me stay. What did you think the world would stand still because you got booted? The first night back, I was overwhelmed with everything I had to deal with. I ended up crying into my pillow, alone in a strange place, with 4 estranged children and no warm body to wrap me in his arms. I hope to catch up on missed quality time with Rich, to reconnect after another year of total absence. I mistakenly thought Rich would feel the same. I slipped back into my life they expected me to live. I worked extra hard, said little, and tried to feel even less. I continually asked God to help me live in a way he would be pleased with. All I wanted was to have the blessings of raising my children. It wasn't long before my children warmed up to me. Rich changed so much. I hardly knew him anymore and wanted to get to know him again. More than that, I needed to feel accepted and loved by Rich, the man who controlled my heart. Mara and Lizzie were both pregnant. Lizzie had 2 more children since Isaac was born, and if Mara didn't have a miscarriage before we moved to Las Vegas, she would too. It felt like a race to see who could have the most children, and I was falling behind. My worth was determined by how many children I could give my husband to build up his kingdom. If only she knew what happened to Mara because of that miscarriage. You just never know what your sister wives are going through because they don't talk. It had been so long since I left my husband's love, not just physically, but spiritually too, since I felt my husband's love. I did not get to sleep beside my exhausted husband, who had in his mercy allowed me to be the one he chose for the night. I felt blessed to be in his presence, the once or twice a month I was with him. I wouldn't sleep. It felt like a waste to sleep through such a rare experience. We hadn't had intercourse for close to 2 years. The last time we had intercourse was odd. Rich always prayed before having any intimate contact, but he said the Lord required a new teaching. Only through fervent prayer and dedication was a man and his wife to have holy connection. Richard was so desperate to have the right spirit, he turned on Warren Jeff's teachings as background noise to make sure our thoughts were pure. What in the world? I'd be so irritated with that voice. Like, We weren't allowed to have sexual intercourse unless we were trying to have kids. Was I ready to commit my life to bringing another beautiful miracle to the world and spend another 9 months on bed rest? I thought about the ripping pain when I carried Isaac. Was I ready to possibly feel that again? I vowed to never get pregnant again after Isaac, but reminded myself of the amazing reward that came from sacrifice. Would it be worth it? Warren Jeff's teaching was clear. Ladies, some of you want to bring forth children for selfish reasons. It is grievous to the Lord. It caused me to ask the tough question of myself. Why am I wanting a child? Is it because I'm desperate to be close to my husband? Am I worried Rich wouldn't find much use for me as he does his other wives? Am I wanting a child because it gives me purpose? What exactly had the prophet meant? Whatever he meant, I made the lifelong choice to bring another miracle into this world. Girl. The land grew during the 18 months I was away. A log mansion and duplex were built, referred to as the A house. It was the first presidency's house. Half the home was Warren's house, which was occupied by some of his family while he was in prison. The other half was split into 2 more halves. The top was the first counselor of the church, and the bottom half was the second counselor's. The prophet's side had a special quarter of home off limits to anyone. Rumors said it was a soundproof area with a bedroom and sitting room. I never saw it for myself. Also, On the prophet's side was a small apartment for the caretaker assigned to the prophet's family. Warren's family weren't allowed to mingle with the rest of the community. From what I could tell, they sewed together all day long. There was a new phone line especially for Warren to call from prison. We began to live for the calls, which gave us connection with the man who held our salvation in his hands. Warren told us multiple times how he'd been delivered from prison and how God was giving his people more time to prepare for the great millennium. Warren also said he was in prison not because of his sins, but because of ours. I felt guilty being the cause of the prophet's pain. We constantly wrote letters and postcards to encourage him. Mara would make postcards at least once a week. Making postcards at least once a week to the man that's causing him so much pain. There was less strictness about women and children going off property. Richard would come and go without saying much. He'd often take Mara. Janetta had headaches and thought it might have something to do with her mouth being too crowded. We set up a dentist appointment and she got a jaw expander when she was 7 years old. Rich put children together in age groups during the day, which made them able to do age-appropriate activities or jobs. Mothers never left their children out of sight, and children were taught to stay busy. Rich had been the presiding elder for quite a while. He also acted as a caretaker to the prophet's family. The first counselor's wife was nurse and midwife for R23, which was relieving for me as I started out a new pregnancy. I felt nauseated but excited. I felt reconnected with my husband and finally earned my children's trust again. The adrenaline of life shot through my veins. The gift of motherhood felt rewarding. We needed to work hard for the privilege to work harder, building the community to make it a place for God to visit and raise our family in eternal happiness. For the first time in a long time, I was excited to wake up and start a new day. Chapter 21, Texas Raid. "Oh my," the midwife said as she rolled the wand across my barely showing tummy. "Oh dear." My mind instantly returned to the day they discovered Charity's lifeless body. Agony returned as the nightmare played with too much clarity in my mind. I didn't dare ask because I didn't want to know. The impulse to cover my ears and run away was strong. I tried to keep my composure as the memories flooded back. Be calm and sweet. What if the Lord heard my complaining and punished me by making my nightmare become my reality? "Rich, look at this," the midwife said. "Don't talk as though I'm not here." A tear escaped down my cheek. Crying already, I didn't even know what was happening. Quickly, I wiped away the evidence of my weakness. The midwife began to talk, and my mind struggled to understand her. What? Did she say I had to wait a whole month before confirming what my baby had? Something about an enlarged heart, fluid on the brain. How much worse could this nightmare get? How can I simply wait for 1 whole month? But I was forced to wait an agonizing month, experiencing flashbacks of my time with Charity. Finally, I was told that the baby was okay, but once again, they put me on partial bed rest and demanded I take it easy. Girl, you are a high-risk pregnancy. If you went to a doctor, they would tell you that. They would let you know because you've had all these traumatic things happen and it's been serious things. You're high risk. It was April 2008. And I was a few months along in my pregnancy when we heard the news from Texas. I didn't want to believe it. The wicked world was not only aware of the land of Zion in Texas, but were now raiding it. The news we heard from what our brothers and sisters suffered made my heart sick. If the FBI stepped foot on the sacred land of refuge, Texas stake of Zion, it will be desecrated, and the guilt will be on the shoulders of his people, the prophet said. Through their lack of faith, many will lose their priesthood and will be traitors to God. So because he was sitting there doing what he was doing and he was marrying underage girls and he's the reason why they're being raided in the first place, now he's blaming them for it. I think the next book is going to be away from this for a little bit because you making me mad. Oh, goodness. Through Through their lack of faith, many will lose their lives, priesthood, and will be traitors to God. This is your chance to call the heavens and command fire to consume those who fight against the work of God. And because they're not going to burn up, I guess that's going to be their fault too. The word struck a chord in me deeper than ever before. Fear pulsed through every fiber of my being in Texas. Over 400 children were being ripped from their families and placed into the custody of the wicked world to do whatever they wanted with them. We heard the world wanted to take the children away from their families permanently and put them into foster care. Mothers begged to go with their children. Fathers were rounded up and warned not to leave the compound. Women suspected of being younger than 17 were taken with their children. It made me sick. This was much worse than anything I experienced. The children were being taken away from their priesthood and might have to live in worldly families. Their fathers and mothers might never see them again. The world used exaggerated accusations to keep families permanently split. It was only a matter of time before the world discovered us in South Dakota. Would we be next? Humbly, we fell on our knees and begged for forgiveness from the Lord for displeasing him. The men were called to gather in unity to pray fervently. We gathered as women and children in our homes and begged the heavens from our brothers and sisters to be safe and for our sins to be forgiven. No one was to speak except to pray and sing until we were delivered or destroyed. We were given instructions to only leave the room to take care of babies and use the restrooms. We sat there, a room of 5 scared women and 14 frightened, confused children, anxiously doing what was required to help save our brothers and sisters. We were given updates from the men in the towers on both lands. By the time they raided the temple walls, I thought for sure the Lord would destroy the earth. The raid lasted forever. Weeks went by as we learned more and more disheartening news. 3 excruciating months later, we were informed the raid was over. In South Dakota, all women and children were led to the vans with our bags and driven off the land. The raid in Texas may have been over, but we had no guarantee the same thing wouldn't happen in South Dakota. We drove by night and arrived in Chadwicks, Colorado by dawn. We rushed into a country home and were given 2 bedrooms and a small office to settle in. Our lives were in danger, and the bad guys wanted to take our children away. We did all we could to calm the children, but little helped. Fear was thick in the air and had become more familiar to us than the calm we used to know. Because of how the feds handled that, they messed that situation up. They did. And they helped Warren with his narrative that the Gentiles are evil and trying to destroy them because they're God's chosen people. They fed right into it. My hand rubbed up and down my now pregnant tummy. I was 7 months along and had fought every minute to stay pregnant. With everything going on, this pregnancy was such a roller coaster of emotions. I was thankful I was only on partial bed rest with strict monitoring. My children were all tucked into bed. In the bed we shared, sound asleep. It took me a while to calm them down and assure them that the bad guys wouldn't take them from me, which is hard to say because sometimes the good guys, supposedly your husband, takes them. So how much did the kids really believe that? The fear of the raid haunted Andrew the longest, and I lovingly rubbed his back until he was sound asleep. Rich left the day after. The children got worked up and believed the world would arrest father. We did all we could to keep them entertained in an unfamiliar home. The next few months were slow. A passing car saw us, so we were rushed to a more rural home in a neighboring city where we had more freedom. It was cold. We seldom got food and for a long time had no power, but at least the children could run and play in the yard. Above all, they were with their mothers. I had gone into preterm labor. They gave me medication and I was put on strict bed rest. Rich told me for years the importance of giving birth on the sacred lands, as those children would be at the top of the Lord's chosen. My greatest fear was I would prove unworthy to return and give birth. When it was 3 weeks until the due date, Richard said he'd take me to South Dakota. At first, I was worried if my kids would be okay in Colorado, but then Rich mentioned we weren't going alone. He was bringing Julie, and my worry dissolved into an anger I couldn't hide. I begged Rich not to bring Julie. I felt selfish for wanting my rare alone time with Rich. Julie went with him nearly every time. Not Mara, but Julie. Many smothered demons arose to haunt me as we made our way to South Dakota. If they weren't brought to light, the Lord would detect me the moment I stepped foot on Zion and punish me in some way. Rich made me a bed in the back seat, and he and Julie rode the entire way as if I wasn't there. When we stopped at the gas station, Julie went to the restroom. Rich opened the door. Sarah B., whatever is the matter, he asked. You know why I'm upset. I haven't spent a moment alone with you in months. I wanted this to be something special we go through together, but you always run away from me if you have another wife with you. Sarah, you know I love you. Can't that be enough? No. Our conversation ended abruptly when Julie climbed into the truck. Rich kissed the top of my head. With that, we were back on the road. For the first time, I returned to Zion with my earthly possessions still in place. Though I felt empty without my children, I wanted to share this with them. They made everything easier to handle. We went to the midwife and got permission to stop taking the medication and prepare to have my baby. Richard went out of his way to ignore me. Punishment for my complaining. See? It's like you can't say how you're feeling, because whenever you say how you're feeling, you get in trouble. And then when you do tell the truth, you're wanted to lie so that the prophet could use it against you. This is some crap. Every time I walked into the room, he and Julie were locked into each other's embrace, tussling on the floor and acting like they were only ones in the house. You make me sick. I saw these instances way too many times to stay quiet. You realize you're not alone, right? Both were half undressed, and I was pissed beyond words. I stormed out the front door to walk off the anger. The beautiful Black Hills of South Dakota helped start to cool my hot head. Why am I so selfish and ungrateful? Sounds to me like he's a little disrespectful. I mean, I'm not going to call her selfish and ungrateful when they're tussling. I think somebody else witnessed this too. I strode down the pathway, kicking every rock I saw. Each step I took didn't let off the steam like I hoped. Instead, it kept building. It threatened to overwhelm me. Directly in front of me on the pathway was Satan himself in form of a snake. I froze. The anger fled and was replaced with blood-curdling fear. Would it strike me? Would this be my fate? More importantly, what happened to my baby? The Lord would tell the prophet I invited Satan onto the lands of Zion, and I would lose everything. I ran as fast as my 9-month belly let me. This was my punishment for talking back to my priesthood head. No one was there when I got back. I ran to my room and fell to my knees. Tears streamed down my face as I begged for forgiveness. Would this act of jealousy make me lose everything? I wanted to run, but where? I didn't have my children. They were in a yellow house somewhere in Colorado, a 7 to 10 hour drive away. I was too exhausted to help in the storehouse or prepare meals for the men on the land. I climbed in bed and went to sleep. Later, labor began soon after. Delivery felt like traveling through a meat grinder. The deep, ripping pain returned. It took a while to stop bleeding, and at one point the midwife insisted on taking me to the ER, though I never ended up there. I was in and out of consciousness, determined to stay and raise the child I brought into this world. Little Violet was safely here. When she was placed in my arms, my heart grew infinity for this precious little one. I soaked up the joy and was newly reminded of how everything was worth this feeling right here. Immediately after delivery, we returned to Colorado, where we remained for a few months until the threat was over. We returned. We breathed easy and we settled back into our lives. My last delivery took a toll on my body. The ripping pain was intense and wasn't going away. Your uterus dropped. I had to search for it, the midwife had said. This is crazy. I was so grateful to be alive, but it hurt so much. Pain was my companion anytime I was active. This must be God's punishment for inviting the snake. Oh, gracious girl. So I humbly accepted the pain and didn't tell anyone. It was easier to bear than having my children taken from me. Violet was 15 months old. The pain became too much. I reached I researched the probable causes of pain and figured I had a prolapsed uterus. Gathering nerve, I told Rich, and I was soon taken to my gynecologist in St. George, Utah. It's wonderful to see you. I miss that beautiful smile. Dr. Williams took my hand and placed his other on top. The last time I saw him was when he removed my appendix. He told me at that time he was concerned about my trauma and my female organs experience. Tell me what you've been up to. I told him about my 2 pregnancies and deliveries. Our conversation continued. He became agitated and reminded me of when he told Rich and I to get medical help years ago before I got pregnant again. Dr. Williams looked concerned, and I sensed he felt like I wasn't being treated well. Where's your husband? I scrambled together a defense. He wanted to come, but he had something important to do. I couldn't make it work. He gave me one last calculating look. We're dear. Let's see what's going on. Thankfully, he changed the subject because I felt like I did something wrong. The doctor used an ultrasound and deep concern came over him. I need to check to confirm. It was only a minute before he was back. Sure enough, girl, you're in trouble if you don't have surgery. He frowned. Schedule one before you leave. Tears rolled down my cheeks. I wasn't pleasing the Lord. How else could I explain why I had so many issues? You're having so many issues because you're not listening to the medical advice of your doctor who's told you that you shouldn't have any more children without consulting a physician, and you're doing it anyways. And then you aren't getting the proper thing. You're talking about how you could feel ripping and tearing, and she told you about your uterus dropping and stuff, and you didn't have any follow-up with this. That's what it is. It doesn't have anything to do with anything else that you got going on, but I guess I'm wrong. Is there something else I can do instead of the surgery? We don't have the money. I couldn't hide the panic in my voice. He looked at me sternly. You must get this surgery. If you don't, you'll face serious problems. How bad is it? On a scale from 1 to 4, you are a 3. You have 3/4 prolapsed uterus. There's something holding it up. I'm shocked your uterus didn't burn with your last baby. If you get pregnant now, it will be life-threatening. The tears wouldn't stop. He walked closer and touched my shoulder. Sarah, you must get this surgery. It's extremely important. I'll tell them to schedule you at my earliest time. This is nothing to play with any longer. How could I tell Rich? The community would either judge me for my lack of faith or assume I made it up. Doctor, I cannot make an appointment. I don't have the authority. We lived in South Dakota and we weren't allowed to see doctors there. It'd bring attention to the group. I'll call Rich. We'll make it work. You're being told about how dangerous how much danger you're in right now, and you're worried about authority and what will happen if you get something that you need, because these women are taught that the problems that they're facing is because of what they're doing wrong. He took me to the reception area and scheduled an appointment for 3 weeks. I didn't have the chance to talk to Rich for a few days when I returned. I didn't like surgeries and still felt like I was being judged for my weakness. Rich eventually let me know Dr. Williams talked to him. They arranged a way to save money on my surgery. They wouldn't put me completely out, and instead they give me an epidural, as much anesthetic as possible without putting me under. It'd be an in and out appointment. Panic come over me. Will I feel it? Yeah, you're going to feel that epidural, that first stick. He'll do his best to mend you so you can have children. Don't worry, the Lord still needs you to bring children into this world. And if it takes surgery, so be it. I'm getting permission to be with you. I'm sorry. I wouldn't want any more kids after this. Like, that would be the end, because she only wanted to have another child because she thought that would bring them closer together. And here you are continuing to put your body at risk. The next few weeks seemed long. The pain was bearable knowing I'd soon have relief. What's more, I hadn't spent quality one-on-one time with my husband in close to a year. Maybe he'd help me feel special like he did when I had Charity. It gave me courage. I forced my mind to focus on the quality time I'd spend with Rich so the surgery wouldn't terrify me. Rich and I agreed we wouldn't tell anybody about my surgery. I didn't want the other ladies to know because they put themselves above me. 3 days before we were scheduled to leave, Rich came to me. Mara is coming with us. Of course she is. Rage took over. Was he scared of being alone with me? Why don't you stay home with Mara and I'll take care of myself in the surgery? It's how much help you'll be with her there anyway. Oh, wow. He looked shocked. This isn't like you. Why can't you support me in my decisions? There's no reward supporting you. I hate surgeries. I need you present, especially since I won't have any anesthetic. You can't bring Mara. I refuse. I'd rather you stay. Getting the pent-up words out felt relieving, but fear quickly replaced it. What would be my punishment? Richard's shocked look lingered, then his expression changed to almost apologetic. Did there linger a part of the man I fell in love with so many years ago? My heart skipped a beat as he sat beside me on my bed. I'm taking time off to go with you. Can't you be grateful? Why do you feel like you have to be the only one who goes? Because this is about her. This isn't about you satisfying your needs by having Mara present. This is about you making sure that you are there for your wife. And she said time and time again, when the other wives are around, you neglect her. And God forbid you put her first in this situation, especially because your need to keep procreating is what helps with the bad things that are happening to her. Do you want me to answer honestly? Because you won't like what I say. Yes, I want to know. Okay, you asked. If Mara is around, she's the only person you see. It's no secret. The silence stretched between us. I felt anxious for his response. You know I care about you. I'm sorry I haven't been there for you in other experiences. So if you still feel this way when we're closer to leave, then I won't take Mara. However, Mara told me that there's a possibility she'll see her dad this weekend. Do you want to take that away from her and me? I could see our holy prophet, and you want to take that away? It's not always about Mara and what she needs. When will you get over your obsession about being married to the prophet's daughter? You have 5 wives and 17 children. You need to be there for all of us. I'm the only one who refuses to bow to her every command. I think she rules the family, not you. I knew I better stop before the punishment got too severe. But the last sentences squeezed out of me. I won't give you permission to take her, and that's final. If this means you won't be there at my surgery, so be it. It'd be harder for both of you to be there. After he left, I pondered about what happened. I never stood up against Richard with such boldness, but I didn't regret it. He needed to hear it. Everybody felt like saying it, but didn't have the guts. My decision thrilled me. Rich avoided talking with me ever since I revealed my feelings. He came to me once and said, "Have you had a change of heart?" When I shook my head no, he said, "I'll pray you make the right decision." Oh, that's so manipulative. She feels how she feels. Later that day, I walked downstairs and stopped when I heard my name mentioned by one of my sister wives. I'm sure it was fabricated, like Saraya's kidney problem and Sarah's difficulties during pregnancy. We all know it's not true. Even though I assumed they all thought this, I felt hurt. Saraya's illness was serious, and I was willing to fight for her. I've been trying for years to get permission from the prophet to have doctors look at her. When I was pregnant with Violet, I was bleeding and on bed rest. When the dangers of miscarriage was over, Rich put me out to pasture and told the other ladies to move my stuff upstairs to the top floor. They were kind enough to set up my bed, but everything else was placed right inside the door. I asked Rich to help, but Rich told me to have one of my sister wives help over my dead body. I started doing it myself. As I worked, I thought maybe I'm exaggerating the frail condition of my pregnancy. Not long after I felt myself contracting and bleeding, I put myself back to bed. I have so much damn pride. My mind came back to the present as I heard Mara's voice. I'm going to lose my chance of seeing my dad because of this charade. Oh yeah, Rachel. You're not as innocent as you seem. And here's the thing. I believe Sarah. At first, when I was reading this book, I wasn't sure because, oh, yeah, little Rachel, whatever. But I believe Sarah, and I believe that she said this. I really do, because we already know that she went to the prison with Warren. So the fact that, to see Warren. So the fact that this is being told, yeah, it's true. My conscience attacked me, and I realized my selfishness. Girl, you're not being selfishness. I'd given anything to see my dad. How could I be so cruel to take that away from someone else? If you knew what happened to Rachel, you would be okay with taking it. Yes, I was hurt by her words, but I wasn't surprised. I walked to the watchtower where Richard spent his 12-hour shifts. After climbing the winding staircase to the top, I took off my shoes and entered. Rich sat with his best friend, Kevin. Okay, Kevin, I'll get with you as soon as I'm off, and we'll go ahead with that. What that didn't matter to me. I swallowed my pride. Rich, I'm sorry I've been cold-hearted. I don't feel any different about what I said, but I don't want to deprive Mara of seeing her dad. I wanted him to see my willingness to obey, but I also wanted him to remember my feelings and respect them. The day came and I climbed in the Ford Expedition. My seat was again in the back. I did my best to make the most of my decision, so I chose not to be intimidated or set aside on this trip. When we were at the rest stop, I turned to Richard when we were by ourselves. I will never forgive you if you don't give me your full attention during my surgery. It's not my surgery. It's not only my surgery, but the body of your future children. And to help those children I already brought into this world. This is about you being there for me. The last words barely came out when Mara returned. I didn't feel malice, just determined. I smiled at Mara. I'm grateful you might have a chance to see your father. I hope it works out. And y'all, that's where I'm going to have to stop because I got a lot of other things to record and my birthday is on Saturday. And I'm sorry that this is not going to be as long as the other ones, but don't charge it to my heart. Do it to my head. Let me know what you think. Who are we believing more at this point? Are we believing Sarah more or are we believing Mara, aka Rachel, more? Because there are some things that I feel like they're both telling us the same story on, and there are other things where I can see where there's some major differences. I'll say this much. I do believe that both of their children experience mistreatment from the other sister wives. I also feel like I believe Sarah when she says that Mara was favored because her being the prophet's daughter changed the way that he treated her because of her standing. But you guys, let me know what you think. Like the video. Until next time.